Thousands of Ukrainian villages died out. They were empty. Thousands of corpses of Ukrainian peasants and their children were lying on the streets. People died of famine in one of the richest agricultural countries of the world because of genocide. In August 1933, communist regime started a campaign of resettlement because the lands stricken by famine were empty now, without rebellious Ukrainians and prosperous Ukrainian peasants. The campaign for resettlement invited Russian and Belarusian farmers to come and start living in the houses that were now empty. Not Ukrainian, but Russian and Belarusian. This changed the cultural identity of so many regions and put many problems into the modern history of Ukraine. This is also a question why so many people speak Russian in some of the eastern regions of Ukraine, because many of them denied their cultural identity as it was a symbol for trauma. Many of them lost connection with their ancestors, and many came from other districts of the bloody Soviet Union to Russify this district and to make it less independent, less free, and of course less Ukrainian. Even now, we don't know the real number of Ukrainian victims of Holodomor, because communists always knew how to hide records and to destroy the memory of nations. But they failed with Ukrainians. According to very likely estimates, approximately 4.5 million Ukrainians died because of famine in 1932-1933, many of whom were children. It is a true act of genocide because it killed millions based on their national identity, because they were Ukrainians, they wanted to be independent from the Soviet Union, and they were persecuted, they were forced to stay within the region that was artificially stricken by famine. These people were also traumatized, and many of them later denied their cultural identity because felt this may lead to death. Post-genocide societies are very complicated and very traumatized, and now we have another trauma caused by Soviet and Russian regime, war, full-scale war in the center of Europe in the 21st century. Again, just because we are Ukrainians and we want to live in a different, democratic and free world, not in the gloomy post-Soviet reality. Since 2006, Holodomor is recognized as an act of genocide against Ukrainians by the Soviet regime by many countries. And we ask you to support this definition, because Russia has to learn on the mistakes of Soviet Union. Back in that time, USSR set unrealistic standards of grain procurement for the greatest grain producer, to destroy the class of successful and prosperous Ukrainian peasants and to stop people from thinking independently, concentrating on their own individual development, and actually to erase the class and the nation. But they failed. I don't know why. I'm always surprised at how many crimes Soviet Union, Russian Empire and modern Russia commits against Ukrainians, and we managed to outstand that. Perhaps we must survive. We must live in this world to make it a stronger and braver place. And now, in the fourth Saturday of November, we commemorate the victims of Holodomor. At school and at the university, we learn a lot about the awful crimes, because survival during the times of Holodomor was difficult both physically and morally. Hungry people can commit a lot of crimes. Cannibalism was present in Ukraine because people lost their minds, and there were more than 2,500 crimes of this type. When people went crazy because of famine and ate their own children or neighbors or weak persons, not because they are bad, but because they lost their minds. Why? Because of genocide. There are lots of awful pages of memories, many books, many films and stories that describe this act of genocide to the world. And I'm really grateful to people, scientists and researchers from abroad who attract attention to this tragedy, like Anne Applebaum, Timothy Snyder, James Mays, Gareth Jones, who even died because of depicting true story of what was happening in the USSR. Actually, many countries received the records of their intelligence services describing millions of dead people on the streets of Ukraine because of famine, and many tried to close their eyes and not to notice what was going on in Stalin's country. In Ukraine, we have lots of institutions and organizations that support the memory of Holodomor and its victims, like the Grains of Truth, the Museum of Holodomor, and I will provide you the links to these web pages, to their web pages below this video, so you can learn a lot. And I believe the world must know about the tragedy of Holodomor, about the victims, so many unborn children, so many lost lives, and I often imagine how different my country would be if 5 million of Ukrainians did not die just because of Russian hatred towards us. Back in 1932-33, in the center of Europe, in the richest agricultural country. Perhaps my country would have been stronger, more culturally identified, more prosperous, maybe not even a part of the Soviet Union. But it is as it is, and we continue our fight against Russia today, and grateful to the world that supports us. So we have to learn the truth about Holodomor and to remember all the names of people who died because of this genocide against Ukrainians. Think about people who had to collect the bark from the trees or to catch sparrows to cook them and eat. Think about those who died unable to fulfill their plans, their love. Think about millions of Ukrainians who died as victims of the genocide created by the USSR. And today we must win this war, and we must teach the world about the strength of Ukrainian nation. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, and I'm happy that my family survived Holodomor, and today I can speak to you.